Falkreath is perhaps one of the most overlooked holds in Skyrim. Think about it, what's there besides one Daedric quest and the Dark Brotherhood questline nearby? Despite being one of the least visited holds, there's actually a surprising amount of locations in Falkreath. For instance, did you know that Falkreath Hold has 7 military installations? If we compared this with Whiterun, the topic of the last installment of this series, that only has 5. This leads me to the topic of today's video. Historically, Falkreath must have had some significance, otherwise the ancient Nords wouldn't have fortified the area so heavily. Since the success of the last installment of this series, I have been contracted by the Imperial Archives to carry out reports on the other cities in Skyrim and answer questions like what makes Falkreath important to Skyrim Civil War. Now, sit back, grab a drink, fix your posture, and let's get into the analysis. Possibly established in the First Era, Falkreath is situated in the south of Skyrim, with borders to Cyrodiil, Hammerfell, Whiterun Hold, the Reach, and the Rift. The key feature of Falkreath's location is that it lies on a crossroad in an otherwise sparsely populated region of Skyrim. Southwest of the city lies a road that leads directly to Hammerfell, making Falkreath the first civilization a traveller will happen upon when reaching Skyrim from that road. If one follows the road north out of Falkreath, they will eventually find a split in the road where they can choose to head north into the Whiterun Plains or east towards Riverwood. Finally is the road to the east of Falkreath, which leads to Helgen. From here, a traveller could go either directly to Brumit in Cyrodiil. This is the road that I personally took on my journey from the Imperial City towards Riverwood, or follow the road through the mountains and into the Rift. Of course, one must take into account the rather grisly events that happened to Helgen recently. A once prosperous town now stands derelict and still smouldering. Regardless, Falkreath's location puts it in a prime position for land travel, allowing it to benefit from travellers from Skyrim, Cyrodiil, and Hammerfell. This also naturally provides a buffer zone for the Stormcloaks, having a physical land barrier to separate their holdings from Cyrodiil and Hammerfell. Further, it is a location that armies would be bound to travel through if invading Skyrim, so from a strategic standpoint it makes sense to be in possession of this area. In addition to the city's strategic importance, its prime position for travellers also of course then leads to more trade, from supplies to lodgings. Keep this in mind in the next section of this report. Upon arrival in Skyrim, I discovered rather quickly that Falkreath is located in the middle of Skyrim's pine forest, so it's only natural for much of its natural resource production to come from cutting down those trees. As a result, Falkreath has 2 lumber mills, the Half Moon Mill on the shores of Lake Illinalta, and Deadwood Mill within Falkreath itself. You might think that Falkreath, owing to the vast amount of trees present, would have more than 2 lumber mills. This is made even stranger by the fact that Deadwood Mill is sat on what is basically a glorified pond. Production from here can't be very efficient. Luckily, Half Moon Mill is located on a stream leading directly into the lake, which will provide it with much more power and thus higher efficiency. The issue with Deadwood Mill could be chalked up to its original developers not understanding the premise of a water wheel, resulting in what we see today, a somewhat unsatisfactory result. The point remains though, even though Falkreath is Skyrim's biggest producer of lumber, even if I did not observe this in my visit there, there's certainly room for more mills to be produced, possibly by using Lake Illinalta as a source and digging streams away from it to provide strong current. At this point in my visit to Falkreath, I'd been told many times that Falkreath is Skyrim's main lumber producer, mainly when going through doors, strangely enough. But my next question in this report is this: where does Falkreath's lumber actually go? Who does Falkreath trade with? Well, because of Falkreath's unique location, it has multiple options for trade. You'll likely find that other Skyrim holds are often in need of good quality lumber for things such as buildings and defences, something which I've no doubt both sides of the Civil War would be interested in. But in addition to this, the lumber can be exported to Hammerfell and Cyrodiil too. In addition, many of the buildings in Falkreath are built entirely from wood, so there's a high chance that a good amount of the lumber the hold produces is invested right back into the city itself, although I use this term loosely as Falkreath is rather small for a hold capital, even by Skyrim standards. Although Falkreath's economy is largely dominated by its lumber industry, I've also found out from speaking to locals and documents within the Imperial Archives that it has opportunities for other raw resource production. For instance, Falkreath has two mines, Embershard and Bile Gulch. Unfortunately, at this time, both of these locations were occupied by less than savoury characters, and unlike other taverns in Skyrim, I could not find any protection for hire, so I couldn't examine these mines myself. Still, I have no doubt that if the Jarl decided to invest in ore production, these mines could be cleared out without huge issues, although this is a large if, as locals seem to brand the Jarl as lazy and unmotivated. As for Falkreath's crop production, it is woefully underdeveloped. In the entire hold, I have only been able to find the existence of a single farm, called Corpselight Farm, and located within Falkreath itself. One cannot doubt this farm is efficient, with it able to produce cabbages, gourd, potatoes, eggs, and milk. Although, as a Cyrodiil native, I am left disappointed in the lack of variety on these Nordic farms. Regardless, the issue lies with the fact that this one farm seemingly serves the entire hold. One need not be a scholar such as myself to realise a single farm in an entire hold is completely inadequate. As a result of this, Falkreath locals likely do a lot of trade and get a lot of their produce from Whiterun Hold, where there is an abundance of farms and a surplus of produce. It is after finding out all of this information about Falkreath's raw resource production that I turned my attention to what it is Falkreath actually produces with these materials. The answer to this, as I found out during my stay here, is seemingly not much. From my experience in Falkreath, it seems to live and die from its lumber industry. If Falkreath had no pine forest, it is likely it would be little more than a struggling village. Regardless, I'd hypothesized about it earlier during my trip, but it was confirmed by observing deals between the mill owner and an individual clad in a full set of 4th era Daedric armour that the lumber Falkreath produces is often used for constructing houses and items to furnish said houses with. By this point in my trip, many of my initial questions had been answered about the economy, but seeing the state of the land of Skyrim, I wondered how the lumber industry present in Falkreath functioned at all. The answer to this is surprisingly interesting. Through my travels in Falkreath, I found that there are many pockets of people who live in the wilds. Some are hunters, others just prefer their own company. These people produced some sense of safety for me during my time walking the roads of Falkreath because I was never too far from some form of civilization. The main reason, though, is the amount of intact military installments the hold has. While it is true that during my time in Falkreath, the majority of these were taken over by various denizens of Skyrim. I even overheard a necromancer chant a spell to raise the dead atop one of the watchtowers. The fact remains that these structures are plentiful in Falkreath. During my travels in the hold, I walked past some of these installations on multiple occasions. While no impressive feat in and of itself, I am a seasoned adventurer and scholar after all. The fact that these installations changed hands multiple times during my time in Skyrim was most perplexing. Perhaps it was this that ensured the hold remained relatively safe. Ne'er-do-wells likely had no idea whether it would be a group of necromancers or an Imperial garrison holed up in the installation. To the point of writing this, I still have little idea about how it was these locations changed hands so quickly, and the locals were no use in figuring this out either. Besides raw material production, Falkreath has one other asset allowing it to keep itself afloat: its vast graveyard. If one has ever been to Falkreath, they'll realise that many of the city's businesses are actually playfully named in the spirit of this graveyard. Take the local alchemy shop, Grave Concoctions, for example. Despite being a place of numerous dead, come to think of it, I'm surprised necromancers don't have a larger presence in this hold. Falkreath has embraced its identity as being built around a graveyard and built something positive from something otherwise quite sombre. Being as well-travelled as I am, I couldn't help but compare Falkreath to Necrom in this respect, although on a much smaller scale, Falkreath shares a similar premise to its Dunmary equivalent in Morrowind. It is this graveyard that drives Falkreath as a destination to visit for many people. I found this out firsthand when I observed that individual in Daedric armour handing a necklace to the local priest of Archaea, Runil. I couldn't hear the exchange fully, but I believed the necklace came from someone all the way from Solstheim and was intended for their mother, buried in the graveyard. I believe, in my limitless wisdom and foresight, that this is the perfect example for the point I want to make here. Take the individual. If they had travelled all the way from Solstheim to reach the graveyard, then they'd surely need a bed and supplies before heading back. Where would one find these two things? At the local inn and general goods store, of course. Both of these needs then take gold earned elsewhere and feed it into the local economy, making a small tourism sector for Falkreath. In my time staying at the inn at Falkreath, I came to one realisation about its financial state. While unable to compare to its neighbouring hold Whiterun, Falkreath seems to be doing well enough for itself with its lumber industry, in addition to a constant stream of people passing through and visiting the graveyard. It is because of this that I believe both sides of the Civil War would be interested in taking possession of the hold. It was on this same evening that I noted down the historical importance of Falkreath. However, a fellow traveller, one Sam Guveen, challenged me to a drinking contest, which I won of course, but in the aftermath I must have lost my notes. As a result, the next part of this report takes place back at the Imperial Archive. P.S. Upon further research, I now believe that Sam Guveen is a pseudonym for Sanguine. As alluded to earlier, the first mentions of Falkreath contained within the book The Adabal Ar seem to suggest that Falkreath originated during the First Era. This was during the time of the Iliad Empire, and the Men of Creeth, as they are referred to in the Songs of Pelennor, were possibly a Nedic tribe who happened to settle in the region that present-day Falkreath now inhabits. What we do know with more certainty is that the city of Falkreath was founded by Biafrad Skjoromor, although when this founding took place is anyone's best guess. In my infinite wisdom, I would like to highlight the fact that while Falkreath seemingly was founded in the First Era, potentially by Needs, neither Biafrad nor Skjoromor strike me as Nedic names, clearly hinting at a possible contradiction in the records. Regardless, not much more is known of Falkreath's origins, but what we do know is that it was the site of many a battle. Perhaps this is why the graveyard is so large. In the Second Era, Falkreath experienced a period of great turmoil, largely due to the ousting of Emperor Leovic. Many of Leovic's former advisors and allies would find themselves fleeing north into the region around Falkreath. Subsequently, they would lay siege to Falkreath, bolstered by their schemes in northeastern Hammerfell, or Craglorn, but would eventually be felled by a group known as the Undaunted, who aided the Falkreath defence remnants in retaking the city. A sad affair that our glorious army could not wipe them out before they caused such havoc in our neighbouring provinces. In the later years of the Second Era also, Falkreath would be the home of Hjalti Earlybeard, or more commonly known now, Tiber Septim. It would also be as a result of King Cúlaicheann's desire to secure his borders at the time that Hjalti Earlybeard would assault Hroldan. You likely know how the Tiber Septim story goes from here. From the origins of Tiber Septim onwards, Falkreath enjoyed a relatively calamity-free history, which it still claims to this day. Even during the civil war currently raging in Skyrim, Falkreath seemingly plays a minimal part when compared to other holds, such as Whiterun. This being said, I posit the theory that, at least in respect of Falkreath's history, this hold may be of interest to Ulfric Stormcloak in particular, largely due to it arguably being the origin of Tiber Septim, or, to connect the dots, Talos, who is the current subject of this civil war in the first place. It is likely that the Empire seeks control of Falkreath, simply to deny and discredit Ulfric Stormcloak, the site of the origin of Tiber Septim's ascent to legend. In my journey to Falkreath, I have discovered a great deal about its economy, its people, and its history. Although I am very happy to have my comfortable bed back at home, those Skyrim inn beds really leave much to be desired when it comes to comfort. I will miss the rather unique personalities present in Falkreath. Even so, let's recount and summarise my findings. Falkreath largely sustains itself on its lumber industry, which, to its credit, is the largest in Skyrim. Most of this lumber now is likely traded with the Imperial Army headed by General Tullius, but a portion of it seemingly is reinvested into repairs of existing properties and the establishment of new ones. Aiding its lumber industry is a small tourist industry, largely fueled by Falkreath's massive graveyard. As I experienced, people make the journey from all over Tamriel to visit their relatives in this graveyard. This then leads to them requiring rest and supplies before making the journey elsewhere, which they can purchase in local businesses such as Grey Pine Goods and Dead Man's Drink. If you are as observant as I, you will recognise that this means that money is fed straight into Falkreath's economy, sustaining the aforementioned businesses and driving improvements to these services. It must be said that this is only possible because of the safety of Falkreath's roads, due to the numerous military installations present within the hold. However, even to this day, as I sit by the fire at my desk, I can offer no true explanation as to why these installations deter brigands and the like, only conjecture. As for Falkreath's history, while it does not compare to Whiterun, it still holds a certain degree of significance. After all, something must have occurred here to prompt the graveyard and high number of military installations. As it would appear, Falkreath was the site of much of the fallout after the fall of Emperor Leovic in the Second Era, leading to the city briefly falling before being retaken by the Undaunted and remnants of Falkreath's defence force. Further than this, Falkreath was also the original post of Hjalti Earlybeard, sent to Hroldan by King Culhwch, where the story of Tiber Septim truly begins. If not for King Culhwch and Falkreath, the Empire may have evolved very differently. Thus, it is a combination of these three main reasons, location, economy, and history, that Falkreath is important to Skyrim Civil War, although it must be recognised that Falkreath's history is likely far more important to Ulfric Stormcloak personally than it is to the Empire. Thank you for watching this video. If you found this video worth your time, please consider subscribing and liking this video as it pushes the channel further towards its goals. What do you think of the new video format? Personally, this was much more interesting for me to script, and I'd like to iterate on this approach, building the story and background of the character present in this video. That's all from me though. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.